Hello, everyone. This is going to be week 13, and group 6 is going to be preventing on the drinker inventory of consequences. This presentation has been created by myself, Drew Hawkins, Fabian Richeria, and Ankar D. I'm going to start with the background and the description of the drinker inventory of consequences. This is an instrument for assessing adverse consequences of alcohol abuse. The drinker inventory of consequences has been under development since 1989. Um, the primary manual was created in 1990 when the Drink Inc. was the core measurements outcome for Project Match, which is a multi-site clinical trial of psychosocial treatment for alcoholism. This assessment was created by and developed by William Miller, PhD, J. Scott Tonigan, PhD, and Richard Longabaugh, ED. This instrument and manual were developed with the support of public funding, and this instrument is placed in a public domain. The drinking-related impairment is a defining characteristic in the diagnosis of alcohol abuse. More generally, the concept of heterogeneous alcohol problems has become a guiding perspective for prevention and treatment. Its target populations are adults with excessive or destructive drinking, alcohol use disorder, and individuals in treatment. Some theoretical background and research usage. The Drink Inc. is grounding in the conceptualization that alcohol-related consequences are central indicators of problem severity, separate from consumption levels. This instrument also aligns with the diagnostics framework such as the DSM, and this criterion emphasizes the functional impairment and consequences rather than the quantity of its use. It reflects a multidimensional model of alcohol-related harm, capturing the biological effects, the psychological distress, and the social and behavioral dysfunctions. The psychometric reliability and validity of this instrument will be well established because it's a psychometrically instrument, and also because it's a multi-dimensional instrument within the consequences of alcohol use. It is widely used in motivational interventions, treatment outcome studies, and clinical trials. The consequences are strong indicators of clinical severity and recovery outcomes. The alcohol-related consequences are only moderately correlated with the consumptions, supporting the need for a separate measurement on the consequences itself. Because the Drink Inc. is a paper and pencil questionnaire administration, it is relatively straightforward. The Drink Inc. is a well-established sound instrument for assessing the multidimensional consequences of alcohol use, and its good reliability is because its internal consistency and stability. It has an adequate to strong validity because of its evolving evidence supporting revised factor structures, and it is significant in their reliability because of its clinical assessment and treatment research, particularly capturing outcomes beyond simple consumption metrics. And now I'm going to pass it along to Encore, who will discuss some of the comparisons of other measurements and the proper use, along as well as the utilization.
Hello, my name is Onkar Deensa, and I'll be picking up from where Drusilla left off. So the first section here, talking about how drink compares to other measures of similar constructs. So I wanted to kind of make sure that whatever assessments I found were obviously related to alcohol, but specifically as close to what like drink is able to do. So there's one here, the Michigan alcohol screening test, MAST. This one's interesting. It is pretty similar, I would say, to the drink assessment, but it groups its domains as social, physical, and legal consequences of drinking. And it also is more focused on lifetime. So what other kind of similar thing that I did like about MAST was that it also asked kind of like situational questions, like, like how has it affected this area, and like the phrasing of it is like in that way as well, which was kind of neat to see. The second one, Addiction Severity Index, this one is broad and more holistic. It covers 7 different areas. And you'll see the areas, so it's like medical status, employment, drug and alcohol use, legal status, family, psychiatric status. So I feel like Drink would probably like group some of these together or just kind of like separate them in different ways. But the main kind of takeaway is that this assessment is a lot more about like quantifying the usage, and it's like all about like how many times did you get hospitalized, how many times were you using this or that, and so very much focused on just that aspect of it, with whatever the drug is, alcohol, everything. And the last one, audit, alcohol use disorders identification test. This one like mainly just focuses on the usage, how often, and even the questions are like all based on like this much frequency, and so very like more like objective, I guess, or tries to be. But I don't really see it as just being objective. I think it also is that it's trying to quantify an experience that isn't, I don't think, entirely quantifiable. So that's why I'll get into this later. I think some of these could be really helpful if used in conjunction with each other. And when it comes to proper use and utilization within the assessment process, I think it's like really helpful to first at least know that alcohol is a problem in the client's life. So you can do this through the intake. And then also I think like this is where the audit assessment could be really useful because it's like a quick screen, just about usage. And, from there you can kind of like, all right, well, I think, it would be important to get more information on this. So you can use it for a lot of different things. I mean, you can use it to establish a baseline of the severity. And as I said, used with like audit, it can give you a more like full picture of not just how it's impacting these different domains, but the behavior too, because it's not completely irrelevant. I mean, some clinicians might not want to focus on like the quantifiable like usage, like, oh, like 5 times a week to 3 times a week, but having a full picture is at least like helpful. I think that it can really decrease defensiveness because like the consequences are so concrete and the way the questions are asked really makes like the person themselves like reflect on their experience like dang, like is this affecting me in this way, like, so I really like the way the questions are kind of like formed in Drink too. And it can also be used to really like pinpoint which domains are the most like affected and to focus on those. So if it's like intrapersonal, and I'll get into this in the next slide. So like once we know the alcohol is an issue, how can we utilize this assessment in therapy? Well, there has to be rapport for sure. And once there's like rapport and you feel like the client is actually ready, like where they're not going to minimize the consequences, they're not going to get defensive, then you can really like use this assessment and dive into it, right? So I think that, there's targeted treatment planning, like I was saying, like if it's intrapersonal issues that they're dealing with, then okay, rather than like, like going to Drink, then, maybe we can develop these like strategies in the meet, like as we kind of work to get you away from the substance. But again, this work has to be collaborative and non-judgmental. Like the information that you find out isn't to shame the client, but to come from a place of love and compassion, and do the work from there. And also, I think this is a great because you can really track progress. I think you can really reinforce client agency also, which is powerful. For example, like, like, hey, like, I'm noticing, or you're noticing that, you're not getting as emotionally dysregulated as often. What do you think that could be coming from, and let them kind of make those connections as they see the progress. I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Fabian for the last part.
Hello, my name is Fabian, and I'll be going over the administrative and scoring procedure as well as availability and source and cultural assumptions and biases section of the drinking inventory consequences. Starting off with this questionnaire, it is a self-report questionnaire, such as the ones that we're most commonly used to as the PHQ-9 and GAD-7. I will add that it is really important to have an alert subject taking this questionnaire. It should be completed under conditions of minimal distraction by an alert subject who is neither intoxicated nor in acute withdrawal. This is mostly important in the sense with the questionnaire being for those who might be dealing with alcoholism. So it is important that we do make sure that they are not intoxicated or having withdrawal symptoms at the time of taking the questionnaire. Now, there are two versions of that questionnaire that I'm going to go over in this section. There's the 2R, which is based on the last 3 months, and the 2L, which is based on the individual's entire life. The 2R version is based on a 3 months time frame, and it is commonly used to measure treatment outcomes at a baseline, post-treatment, and follow-up, and has different set responses than the 2L. The drinking inventory consequences can be administered in a group setting. It is specifically designed as a self-report question that is brief and easy to complete, making it suitable for multiple people to fill out at the same time in a common area. It is typically administration time is around anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes, and it is a 15-item scale questionnaire. Moving on to the scoring procedure. For this questionnaire, each item corresponds to one of 5 subscales, the subscales being physical consequences, interpersonal consequences, intrapersonal consequences, impulse control consequences, and social responsibility consequences. As for the scoring, items for the 2L for the lifetime are usually scored from a 0 equals no and yes is 1. Now in terms for the 2R, the 3-month questionnaire time frame, never is 0, once or a few times is 1, once or twice a week is 2, and daily or almost daily response is 3. Subscale scores are calculated by summing relevant items. As I mentioned, there's 5 different subscales. So for this section, we will sum up, for example, the questions that are for physical consequences and see what that score is, the questions for impulse control, and get those individual scores. The reason that we do that is because it can help answer questions such as in what specific area is drinking causing the most harm. For example, if the client scores the highest on the physical section, it can kind of tell us that they might be having some health effects. If they score higher on the impulse control section, it can tell us that it's a riskier or uncontrollable behavior that they might be experiencing due to their alcoholism or their presenting problem. Now, as for the total score, that is obtained by summing all items together, and it can help answer questions such as how severe are the overall consequences of this person's drinking. For a quick interpretation of the scores, the higher score indicates greater negative consequences related to the alcohol use, and the scores can be used to assess severity, monitor treatment progress, and identify problem areas. For the availability and sources of section for this questionnaire, the drinking inventory consequences, I had some difficulty finding much information on it. Thankfully, I was able to find that primary resource that you can see in this slide, which was about a 90-plus page article, I believe it was, or like book from 1995 discussing everything regarding from scoring, what the assessment is, and all that other information that was able to help me gather all the information for today's presentation. That being said, in terms of availability, as I said, is not really typical. This questionnaire was designed for a clinical and research setting and is widely used in substance use treatment programs, psychological research studies, and outcome evaluations for interventions. It is not like the typical PHQ-9 or GAD-7, which are commercial tests that are available for almost everybody to use. That being said, the drinking inventory consequences can be found in multiple places, some of them being the academic journal articles, treatment manuals, and the NIAAA related resources, which is the National Institute of Alcohol and Abuse and Alcoholism. To finish off this presentation, I'll be going over the cultural assumptions and biases and proper use in cross-cultural and multicultural settings. It is important to not assume that alcohol use is a common behavior. I say this coming from a Mexican background where people from the outside might see alcohol as a normal behavior in our culture. While it can be the thing for many people, it does not apply to everybody. So it's really important to not assume that just because a person looks a certain way or is from a specific culture, that alcohol consumption is a normal behavior. It's also important to take into consideration stigma around alcohol, because some cultures might underrepresent alcohol problems. It could either be due to fear, or it's just some of the things being asked to report the alcohol use are just common and actually normal in their culture. That being said, when assessing or using that questionnaire with different cultures, it is very important um, to take into consideration that the direct translation may lose meaning. Things that you translate might have a specific meaning within like the dictionary, but mean differently to that culture, and it's very important to keep that into consideration. That being said, in terms of adaptation, it is really important to use culturally validated versions when available. This goes back to the language translation. It is always used if possible. Maybe, I don't know, find a person from that culture who can help in assessing or translating that assessment so it can properly translate to a way that it will resonate with that person's background and culture. For interpretations, it is important to take into consideration the cultural norms about drinking within that person's background, as some things that might be reported as severe or in Western culture might be normal in other cultures, such as mine, Mexican. And finally, to finish this off, for the cultural common sense, it is really important to be aware of cultural beliefs about alcohol and stigma and disclose patterns. And as for everything else, to build rapport to improve on responding within the clients, even more so if we are working with clients from a different background. Thank you guys for watching.